AITA for refusing to babysit my sister's kids for free. Turns out she paid for cleaning but didn't want to pay me for babysitting. I 27 female have always been close to my older sister, Lauren 32 female. Growing up, we were typical sisters, sometimes best friends, sometimes at each other's throats, but always there for each other when it really mattered. When she had her first child, Milo, I was thrilled to become an aunt. And when Sadie was born 3 years later, I was just as excited. I adored them both, and I wanted to be the fun, supportive aunt who was always around. Naturally, I would help Lauren out whenever she needed it. If she had an emergency, I'd drop everything to watch the kids. If she was overwhelmed, I'd come over and entertain them so she could have a breather. If her babysitter canceled last minute, I'd step in without hesitation. I never asked for anything in return, because that's what family does, right? But over time, things started to change. What began as the occasional favor gradually became something much more demanding. At first, it was little things, Lauren asking me to watch the kids for an hour so she could run errands or squeeze in a workout. Then, it became longer stretches, like watching them for the evening so she and her husband could have a date night. And then, before I even realized it, I was babysitting nearly every weekend, sometimes for an entire day, without being asked so much as, "Hey, are you free?" It just became an unspoken expectation that my weekends belonged to Lauren and her kids. At first, I didn't mind. I love my niece and nephew, and I genuinely enjoyed spending time with them. But as time went on, I started to feel more and more taken advantage of. It wasn't just the time commitment, though that was a big part of it, it was the complete lack of appreciation. It wasn't, "Thank you so much for doing this," or "We really appreciate you." It was just assumed that I would be there, no matter what. And if I ever said I had other plans? Cue the guilt trips. "But we already told Milo you were coming. I just really need a break. Come on, it's just for a few hours." I started to feel like I had no control over my own time. I work full-time. I have friends, hobbies, responsibilities. But somehow, my personal time had become secondary to my role as my sister's free nanny. I tried to push through the resentment, telling myself that it was just a phase, that maybe once the kids got older, it would ease up. But it didn't. It only got worse. The breaking point came when Lauren asked me, yet again, to babysit on a Saturday. Not for an emergency. Not because something urgent had come up. But because she and her husband wanted to go on a nice, long brunch date. When I told her that I had plans that weekend and couldn't do it, she acted like I had just told her I was never speaking to her again. She got so upset, saying, "I just don't understand why you're suddenly being so selfish about this." I was stunned. Suddenly, I was the selfish one for not wanting to give up my free time every single weekend. I tried to stay calm and explain my perspective. I told her that I didn't mind helping occasionally, but this had become too much. That it wasn't fair to expect me to be available every single time they wanted to go out. That I had my own life and responsibilities. I even suggested that if she really needed regular help, maybe they should consider hiring a babysitter. That was apparently the worst thing I could have said. She looked at me like I had betrayed her in the worst possible way. "Family doesn't charge for help," she snapped. Her husband chimed in too, saying they already spent so much money on the kids and didn't need another expense. I reminded them that I had been helping for free for years, but I wasn't their full-time nanny. That's when she hit me with, "I thought you loved my kids." That stung. A lot. Because of course I love them. I love them enough to have put my own needs aside for years just to make sure they were cared for. But love doesn't mean being taken advantage of. Love doesn't mean being expected to give and give and give without ever being considered in return. Since that argument, things have been tense. Lauren barely speaks to me now. She hasn't outright cut me off, but she's cold and distant. Her husband is the same way. It's like they decided that because I set a boundary, I must not care about them at all. I tried reaching out once, sending a message saying that I love them and that I'm still happy to help from time to time, but I just can't do it every weekend. She left me on read. I've talked to friends about it, and most of them agree that what she was doing wasn't fair. That helping family is great, but it has to be within reason. One friend suggested I should have set boundaries earlier, before it got to this point. Maybe she's right. Maybe if I had spoken up sooner, things wouldn't have escalated the way they did. But part of me wonders if it even would have made a difference. So now I'm sitting here, wondering if I handled this the wrong way. Maybe I should have just sucked it up and kept doing it. Maybe I should have been more patient. Or maybe, just maybe, I was right to finally put my foot down. Am I the asshole? Update 1. I had spent the past several days in an uneasy silence with Lauren. The air between us felt thick, heavy with the weight of all the unspoken words, all the resentment and frustration that neither of us was willing to budge on. I knew she was still upset, but I thought maybe she was cooling off, maybe taking some time to reflect on how unfair she had been. After all, I had never refused to help before. Maybe now that I had finally put my foot down, she would realize that she had been taking my time for granted, that it wasn't unreasonable for me to expect some respect for my own boundaries. I certainly wasn't going to be the one to reach out first. I had made myself clear. If she needed childcare, she could pay for it. That was it. Simple. Reasonable. Or so I thought. Then, out of the blue, she texted me. No apology. No acknowledgement of the argument we'd had. Not even a half-hearted attempt at smoothing things over. Just another request. She asked if I could watch the kids, just for a couple of hours, on Friday evening. That was it, no preamble, no pleasantries, no concern about whether I was even available. Just the assumption that I would say yes. Because I always had. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me was tempted to just ignore it. Let her sit in the silence for a little longer, let her wonder why I wasn't jumping to accommodate her like I always did. But another part of me, the part that had spent years bending over backward for her, still felt that pull, the instinct to keep the peace, to smooth things over, to avoid yet another conflict. But I couldn't do it. I knew that if I gave in now, she'd take it as a sign that she had won, that nothing had really changed. That I was still the same person she could guilt and manipulate into doing whatever she needed. So I forced myself to stick to what I had said before. I kept my response short and clear. If it's paid, yes. If not, sorry, but no. And then, nothing. No response, no reaction. Just silence. At first, I felt a twinge of anxiety. Had I gone too far? Was she angrier now? But as the minutes ticked by and the silence stretched, something unexpected happened. I felt relief. A deep, settling relief, like I had finally taken control of something that had been slipping through my fingers for years. Maybe this was it. Maybe she had finally understood that she couldn't keep relying on me without even a shred of appreciation or reciprocity. I went about my evening, letting myself breathe, for once not tethered to her expectations. I assumed she had found another solution. I mean, she had to, right? There were other options. She could have stayed home. She could have asked her husband to watch the kids. She could have hired a babysitter like any normal person would. There were a dozen different ways she could have handled this. I assumed she had chosen one of them. But then, around 9 p.m., my phone rang. It was our mother. The second I answered, she was shouting. How could you set Lauren up like that? Her voice was sharp, filled with fury that I didn't even understand yet. The words hit me like ice water, shocking me into stillness. My stomach twisted. Set her up. What was she talking about? Before I could even ask, she kept going, her words tumbling out in an enraged rush, her accusations hitting me one after another. Lauren had been forced into an awful situation because I had refused to help. She had been left stranded with no options. And worst of all, I had let the kid suffer. The accusation made my blood run cold. I gripped my phone tighter, my heartbeat drumming in my ears. What the hell had happened? What could she possibly mean? I tried to get a word in, tried to ask what on earth was going on, but my mother wasn't interested in hearing my side. She had already made up her mind. I was the villain. I was selfish. I had abandoned my sister. And the worst part, the part that made my skin crawl, was that my mother truly believed that this was my fault. That if I had just given in, if I had just watched the kids like Lauren had wanted, everything would have been fine. I felt sick. I had to get the full story from Lauren herself. I called her, my hands shaking as I pressed the phone to my ear. She answered, her voice eerily calm, as if she had been expecting me. And when she told me what had happened, I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had gone out anyway. She had left Milo, a 6-year-old, and Sadie, a 3-year-old, home alone, assuming that at the last minute, I would come to my senses and show up. My stomach dropped. My vision blurred with rage and disbelief. She had actually done it. She had actually gambled with her children's safety just to prove a point. Just to make me feel guilty. At some point in the evening, Milo had gotten overwhelmed because Sadie wouldn't stop crying. He didn't know what to do. He got scared. So he called our grandmother, our mother's mother, who then called my mother, who immediately dropped everything and rushed over. That was how it all unraveled. My mother stormed into the house, expecting to find me there, expecting to see me sitting with the kids like I always did, like Lauren had assured herself I would. But instead, she found 2 terrified little kids with no adult supervision. And instead of blaming Lauren, the person who had actually left them alone, she blamed me. If you had just helped your sister, this wouldn't have happened. That was her logic. Not that Lauren had been reckless. Not that she had made a horrible, irresponsible decision. Not that she had put her own children in danger. No. In my mother's eyes, I was the one who had forced Lauren into a bind. I was the one who had made this happen. It was so absurd, so deeply unfair, that for a long moment, I didn't even know how to react. The weight of it, the sheer ridiculousness of it, was crushing. I kept asking how Lauren could possibly think this was okay, how she could have done something so reckless, how she could have left her kids alone and just assumed I would come. And she just kept repeating the same thing over and over, as if it was the only justification she needed. She had been sure I would come. She just knew I wouldn't let her down. She had never even considered the possibility that I might not show up. It had never crossed her mind that I would actually say no and mean it. In her world, I was supposed to be the one who always bent, who always put her first, no matter what. The idea that I had refused, that I had drawn a line and stuck to it, was so unfathomable to her that she had been willing to leave her children alone just to test me. And yet, somehow, in all of this, I was the villain. I was the selfish one. I was the one who had put my own interests above her needs. Update 2. I tried not to think about the situation. I really did. I tried to push it out of my mind, to go about my life as if none of it had happened, as if my own sister hadn't left her kids alone and then somehow managed to make me the villain of the story. But no matter how much I wanted to move on, Lauren wouldn't let me. A few days after everything had blown up, my phone lit up with a message from her. This time, the tone was different. She wasn't angry anymore. There were no accusations, no guilt-tripping, no passive-aggressive jabs. Instead, her words were smooth, casual, as if we had just had a minor disagreement, as if I had just been stubborn for a little too long and now it was time to let it go. As if we could just erase everything that had happened with a few messages. Let's just forget about it, she wrote. You're the closest person to my children anyway. Is it really that hard for you to spend time with them? I stared at my screen, my jaw tightening. She spoke as if we had just had a simple misunderstanding, as if I had overreacted, as if I was making things harder than they needed to be. There was no acknowledgement of what she had done. No admission that leaving her children alone was reckless and dangerous. No apology. She wasn't reaching out to mend things, she was reaching out to reinstate the old dynamic, the one where I was always available, always willing, always bending to her needs. I felt something inside me snap. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let her pretend that none of it mattered, that none of it had been real. I sent back a single message, direct and to the point. I asked her if she even admitted that leaving the children alone was wrong. Her response came quickly, almost too quickly, as if she had already convinced herself of her own version of the truth. They were home. Safe. Nothing bad happened. My fingers clenched around my phone. My stomach twisted. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. Not only did she refuse to acknowledge the gravity of what she had done, but she was actually justifying it. She had convinced herself that because nothing catastrophic had occurred, her decision had been fine. That the fact that Milo had been scared out of his mind, that Sadie had been crying uncontrollably, that they had felt abandoned and alone, somehow didn't count because the worst hadn't happened. At that moment, I realized that she would never change. There would never be a moment of clarity where she saw herself for what she was doing. She would never wake up one day and suddenly recognize how unfairly she had treated me, how much she had taken me for granted, how deeply she had crossed the line. In her mind, I was the one being difficult. I was the one causing problems. And since nothing truly terrible had come from her choice, she didn't feel the need to take any responsibility for it. I was still staring at her messages, my heart pounding, when my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I should have let it go to voicemail. I should have known exactly what was coming. But I answered, and the second I did, I regretted it. She started talking as if we had already been having this conversation, as if I had been waiting for her call, as if I should have already known what was expected of me. She told me that I needed to smooth things out with Lauren, that I needed to stop being so harsh and start acting like a sister again. That Lauren was going through a hard time right now and that I, as her family, needed to step up and support her. As if I hadn't already been doing that for years. As if I wasn't the one who had been holding her together when she needed it, the one who had been sacrificing my time, my weekends, my energy to make sure her children were cared for. I was still processing those words, still trying to decide how to even respond, when she added something that made my mind go completely blank. She said that if I was so greedy about my time, then I could just pay for Lauren's babysitter myself. I froze. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if I had misheard her. If I had misunderstood. If she had meant something else. But she kept talking, kept going, kept digging the knife in deeper, and I realized that she was serious. She truly, genuinely believed that the responsibility of Lauren's children fell on me to the extent that if I wasn't willing to give up my own time, then I should just hand over my own money to make up for it. I could barely breathe. The sheer absurdity of it, the entitlement, the complete disregard for my own life, my own needs, my own autonomy, it was suffocating. I forced myself to ask her why. Why should I do this? Why was it my problem? Why did Lauren's childcare suddenly become my financial responsibility? Her answer came without hesitation, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because family helps family. The words rang in my ears, hollow and weightless. They weren't an argument. They weren't logic. They were just another way to manipulate me. Another way to push me into a role I had never agreed to. Another way to make me feel like saying no was wrong. I understand help. I understand stepping up for the people you love. I understand support and generosity and being there when it truly matters. But when it turns into a demand, into an obligation, into manipulation, it's no longer help, it's exploitation. Update 3. After everything that had happened, I decided the only way forward was to distance myself from both Lauren and my mother. I had spent so much time trying to defend myself, trying to reason with them, trying to make them see how unfair their expectations were. But they never listened. No matter how clearly I set my boundaries, they twisted everything back around to make me the selfish one, the one who wasn't being a good sister, the one who should just give in and do what they wanted. I was tired of fighting, tired of justifying, tired of feeling like I owed them something I had never agreed to. So I stopped responding. When Lauren texted, I ignored it. When my mother called, I let it go to voicemail. It wasn't easy. A part of me still felt that old, ingrained guilt, the feeling that I was somehow being cruel by not engaging, by not trying to fix things. But the more time passed, the lighter I felt. It was as if I had been carrying this invisible weight on my shoulders for years, and only now was I beginning to realize how heavy it had been. I focused on my own life. My own work. My own friends. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't shaping my weekends around when Lauren might need me. I wasn't constantly waiting for the next request, the next guilt trip, the next favor disguised as an obligation. And then, just when I thought I was finally free from all of it, something happened that confirmed I had made the right choice. I was out with a mutual friend, someone who knew both me and Lauren, but wasn't deeply involved in the situation. We weren't even talking about Lauren at first, just chatting about work, life, the usual things, when, out of nowhere, she casually mentioned, Lauren finally hired a cleaner. I barely registered the words at first. It didn't mean anything to me. Just another piece of small talk, something that barely touched the surface of my mind. But then, a second later, something clicked. A cleaner? That didn't make sense. I hadn't heard anything about Lauren wanting a cleaner. And why would she? She had always made it sound like money was tight, like she couldn't possibly afford any extra expenses, like hiring someone for help was completely out of reach. I asked about it, trying to keep my voice neutral, and what I learned made my stomach turn. Lauren had been paying the exact same nanny she had tried to impose on me all this time. But not to look after the kids. Not to provide the care that she had insisted she couldn't afford. She was paying this person to clean her house. It hit me like a slap to the face. She had the money. The money had always been there. She had just chosen not to spend it on childcare. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. Because she would rather pocket that money and push the responsibility onto me, guilt me into taking on the work for free, manipulate me into believing it was my duty, all while paying someone else for something entirely unrelated. I felt sick. The sheer hypocrisy of it was staggering. Every argument she had thrown at me, every time she had claimed that hiring a sitter was too expensive, that I was being unreasonable, that I was putting a financial burden on her, none of it had been true. She just hadn't wanted to pay me. She had no problem spending money on convenience, as long as that convenience didn't involve fairly compensating me for my time. She had seen me as the free option, the one she could exploit without consequence. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For so long, I had questioned myself. I had wondered if I had been too harsh, if I should have handled things differently, if I was somehow in the wrong for setting my limits. But this erased any doubt I had left. I called my mother. I needed to hear what she had to say about it. I needed to know if she was aware of this, if she still had the audacity to defend Lauren even now. When I asked, she didn't even hesitate. She already knew. She didn't deny it, didn't express even a shred of surprise. And worse, she wasn't even ashamed of it. She told me it was different. That hiring a cleaner was not the same as hiring a babysitter. That the cleaner was a stranger, and I was Lauren's sister. That family should help family, that it wasn't about money, that I should want to do it because it was the right thing to do. I couldn't even process it. She said it so calmly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. As if it was just a fact of life that my time was worth nothing in comparison to Lauren's convenience. As if I should have been honored to give up my weekends, my free time, my peace of mind, simply because I was her sister. That was it. That was the moment I knew, without any hesitation, that I was done. I didn't want to be part of this dynamic anymore. I didn't want to be the go-to person for their endless demands, the one they could lean on whenever they didn't feel like handling their own responsibilities. I had spent too much of my life bending to their expectations, playing the role they had written for me. So I sent Lauren one final message. Short. Direct. Clear. I told her I was done. I told her not to ask me about the kids again. She didn't even read it. And that, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know.